If something external causes distress, it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but rather your judgment about it. And that, you have the power to eliminate. Now, as they say, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who was the best-known historian and wrote down these thoughts in his diary, said, "The first principle of practical Stoicism is this: we do not react to events, we react to our judgments about events. And judgments depend on ourselves." Stoicism says, in other words, that our pleasures, sorrows, desires, and fears involve 3 stages instead of 2. Not just an event and a reaction, but rather an event, a judgment, or an opinion about it, and only then a reaction. Our task is to perceive this intermediate step, to understand its common irrationality, and to control it through the higher self, before reason. Our reactions to whatever happens usually seem direct and spontaneous. They do not seem to involve any judgment. Or at least not the kind of judgment that could exist in other circumstances. The Stoics consider all this a lie, an illusion. The work of dispelling this idea is difficult because the mind is not a reliable narrator when it comes to the origins of our reactions. It tells us that we react to external elements, things out there, not to the mind itself. It needs to learn to see and describe its own role more accurately. In Stoicism, we try to learn to think more accurately about our thoughts, to teach the mind to understand the mind, to make the fish more aware of the water. Let's say someone insulted you. The insult has no meaning beyond what you make of it. If you are bothered, it must be because you care. In other words, you make a judgment. Instead, you could simply decide that it is not important, and then it would be the end of the insult for you. Every kind of annoyance we have in life can be seen in the same way. The noisy neighbor, the bad weather, the traffic jam. If you feel irritated by these things, it is because you are irritated by the judgments you make about them. That they are bad, that they are important, that it is expected for someone to get upset about them. The events themselves do not force you to think any of that. Only you are capable of doing so. The same goes for larger setbacks, desires, fears, and all other mental events. We always feel like we are reacting to things in the world, but in reality, we are acting upon ourselves. And in most cases, changing ourselves is more effective. It is wiser than trying to change the world. The idea that our reactions depend on our judgments. It may seem a bit peculiar, especially if judgments are all imagined as conscious and rational. But a judgment can take different forms. For example, if you conclude that spiders are not dangerous but still feel afraid of them, that shows that your fear is there regardless of the opinion you may have about spiders. It simply means that you have conflicting judgments, that spiders pose both a danger and no danger. The Stoics sometimes considered all the judgments we bring into the world when we are born, the presence or absence of appetite that makes a dish of food seem better or worse, a lifetime of conditioning that produces the same effect on a broader scale. The Stoics did not make a distinction among all the forms that our judgments can take: conscious opinions, unconscious beliefs, conditioned responses, chemical exposures, genetic tendencies, and so on. And how some of these factors can be more easily altered than others. However, they recognize that some reactions have a foundation that we cannot control and that certain temperament characteristics are inherent and cannot be changed. We can consider that the Stoic goal, ultimately, is to become aware of our judgments and capable of controlling them as much as possible. The Stoics claim that our ability to modify our experiences through changing our thoughts about them is much greater than we normally assume. I hope that these assertions are accepted, not solely on faith, but are supported with arguments. Sometimes, they use simple examples like the insults we mentioned earlier, things that anyone can see and that only hold importance if we give them the weight they deserve. For reactions that seem more inevitable, the Stoics often use comparisons to support their arguments. They observe the different ways in which people react to the same events in different circumstances, times, and places. What some people fear, others do not. What is sometimes a valid sacrifice for some is simply nothing for others. The weight of sadness, distress, and discomfort, which seems like an undeniable fact to us, is experienced very differently by each individual. Take, for example, the case of Paul. He lives a completely chaotic life, with a routine that is utterly uncomfortable for him. The discomfort has become something normal, water with which he is already accustomed to living. You are correct in pointing out that while it may seem simple to talk about treating thoughts and judgments as a matter of choice and practice, it is not always easy to do so. It is something that requires effort and continuous practice. Many people have the habit of validating anything that goes through their minds, ideas, and opinions without questioning them. However, the ability to control and replace these harmful thoughts is fundamental to Stoic practice. One way to approach this is to stop telling yourself one thing and then later tell yourself another, replacing the judgment in a less verbal manner. This process of crushing a harmful thought and replacing it with something healthier is a source of satisfaction for Stoics and is a skill that improves with practice over time. We can choose not to have an opinion about something and not be bothered by it because things in themselves do not have their own power to affect our judgments. It is important to elevate our lives above casual occurrences, as Marcus Aurelius stated in his Meditations. We should remember that a human life is limited, whether by luck or by misfortune, and that we should not overly concern ourselves with transient things. This does not mean seeking a state of emptiness, but rather freeing the mind from foolishness and errors of judgment. It is worth noting that none of the Stoics we have mentioned so far sought a secluded or withdrawn life. They held positions of power and complexity in their lives. The goal of the Stoics was not to withdraw from the world, but rather to develop a wise and tranquil inner stance in the face of external circumstances. The Stoics assert that our reactions to all things are created by the subtle thoughts and judgments we construct about them. They encourage us to look inward with greater attention. Small pleasures corrupt the mind-body, not because suffering is difficult, but because suffering softens us. We get annoyed by coughs, sneezes, dogs obstructing our path, or keys slipping from our hands. The philosopher Seneca puts it concretely, saying that we are more sensitive to a cut made by a surgeon's scalpel than to 10 sword wounds in the midst of a battle. In summary, Stoic practice involves questioning and controlling our thoughts and judgments, not being enslaved by them. Learning to change our perspectives and reactions to things can bring peace and serenity amidst the adversities of life. The Stoics suggest that we think about other people who react differently from us to a particular event. When everyone shares a weakness, it no longer appears as a weakness but rather something common to all. We should think about those who react with less intensity than us to something or observe a person who can tolerate things that we cannot bear. In these cases, our reaction may seem like our own fault. The Stoics often belittle pain and other external afflictions, showing disdain for them. However, it is important to understand that belittlement and disdain do not necessarily have a negative connotation here. They suggest that we should see something as so small and unimportant that we perceive ourselves as superior to it. For example, Cicero talks about seeing children in Sparta, young people in Olympia, and barbarians in the amphitheater suffering serious injuries and enduring them in silence. He questions whether, in the face of some pain, we will scream or endure it with determination and steadfastness, without crying. He states that nature does not tolerate those who cannot bear pain, but also mentions that many are capable of enduring it under different circumstances. What we are accustomed to seeing others do, what we are accustomed to doing and feeling ourselves, can become something normal or strange, inevitable or a matter of choice. These forces act invisibly, and the charm of familiarity must be broken. One way to do this is by observing the wide range of reactions that the same things can evoke in people in different conditions. Therefore, when applying these Stoic teachings to modern times, it is important to recognize that our reactions can be shaped by our perception and how we interpret situations. By observing different perspectives and ways of dealing with adversity, we can broaden our understanding and develop a wiser stance towards life. If these teachings have been helpful in any way, I suggest subscribing to the channel to receive more content on ancient wisdom. Thank you, and until next time.